your favorite girl, Enjoli, back with another episode of Church Girl Problems. I am so glad you are here with us today. Go ahead, like, share, subscribe. Go ahead and share this with your homegirl or even your homeboy. And the last time we did this episode, I forgot to mention, go get your notebook, get your phone, take some notes, because the whole purpose of this podcast is not just to expose our human experiences or the things we've learned in church, surrounding church or God, but also so we can get healed together. So go ahead and grab what you need while you're liking, while you're sharing, while you're subscribing to the channel so you can stay up on all the latest episodes. Without further ado, okay, so I have a special guest with me today.
Yes.
And I'll let her introduce herself. But before we get into it, I just need to let y'all know something first. Like, this is interesting that we're sitting here because sis used to hate my guts. Maybe not so far as like hate my guts, but
strongly dislike.
No, seriously, like
yes.
Strongly dislike. So to be at this point so many years later,
yes.
Honestly, it's nothing but God. But I think it probably came around how it was supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
So y'all probably wonder, well, why did she hate her guts? What happened? We're going to give you just a little snippet of the tea. So I'm going to have her introduce herself. I want you to give your name. Mm-hmm. I want you to give your favorite ice cream.
Okay.
And how or why you hated my guts.
So my name is LaShonda Franklin. My favorite ice cream is chocolate chip cookie dough. And without going too far into it, yes, I did used to strongly dislike Enjoli. And the reason was, I'm just going to be completely honest and vulnerable and humble. I was wrong. I was very close to someone who made me believe that Enjoli was the problem instead of me getting to know Enjoli for myself. And when it came full circle for me to really see her for who she was, I invited her out to lunch and apologized.
Yes, ma'am.
Because as a woman, I think that's important for us to take accountability when we're wrong. And when we're right, that's fine. But sometimes we don't get it right. And I got it wrong. And, publicly on your platform, yes, I do apologize for misjudging you and not getting to know you for myself, because I was wrong. Because you are a beautiful person.
I didn't expect that. Okay, so before we jump into the episode, you might see some little products here on the table. Yes. Sis has some businesses, okay? So go ahead and take a quick 1 or 2 minutes and tell us all about what we see right here.
Okay, so I am the owner and creative mind behind Fab Diva Nails LLC. So I have two parts of that business. I have Diva Press Nails, which is I make custom press on nails specific to your nail shape and size that you like. I'm wearing them right now. And I also have External Reflections, and these products are part of that line. This is just a snippet. So I make soap, body oil, cuticle oil, and shower steamers. These are some of the body oils, the bar soaps, and the shower steamers. Part of my line is a feminine hygiene line. The Power Bar and Power Oil, it is good to help us and our lady bits, keep us fresh, keep the odor under control, prevent bacteria that cause BV and yeast infections. So I do have a website if you're interested, yourexternalreflections.com. Okay,
so now you have a very interesting story, and I believe that probably is what birthed External Reflections.
Yes.
If you don't mind, just give us that story and how we even got to what External Reflections is all about.
Okay, yes. So my business, Fab Diva Nails, was established in 2020 during COVID. Mm-hmm. External Reflections was established in January of last year of 2023. So just long story short, I'll give you a little backstory. After my divorce and getting into some real self-healing and going through depression and different things, God really started dealing with me about my self-worth, about how to love myself and what He thinks about me. And He gave me the vision behind External Reflections. My motto is externally reflect the beauty that resides within. And God really had to tell me what He thought about me, that I am beautiful, that I am worth it, that no weapon formed against me shall prosper, all of these things. And I said, Lord, I want to make something that will make others feel that way. So my products, I pray and I hope, make you smell good, make you feel good when you're using them, make you relax when you're using the shower steamers. All of these things, I want you to think about what God thinks about you. And it was very important for me to make these products to make others hopefully be able to feel good about themselves. And specifically the Power Bar, which is the feminine hygiene bar, and the Power Oil, just for our feminine hygiene. There's a story behind that too, but that's for another time.
Okay. So I think that's amazing. And I think that, because you mentioned God, and so most guests that are going to be on the show are either Christian, believers, or whatever words you want to use. And I find that sometimes as women that you talk about, like, it took you going through a divorce to realize that you were beautiful and that God says all of these amazing and wonderful things about who you are. Mm-hmm. But yet you were in an institution or a covenant that's supposed to involve God, but you kind of imply that you didn't feel those things at that time. Is that, can you say that to be true? Or how does that work when you are a woman of God, you are a believer, and it doesn't sound like you stopped believing at any point, right? You always had God.
I got to a point where, there was a process, but I was angry at God for certain times. But I never strayed away to the point where I just completely left him and I stopped believing. No, that never happened. But you are right. I would say it's twofold. I feel like there were times when I didn't feel beautiful while I was married. And then on the other hand, I can't necessarily say it was anybody else's responsibility to make me feel beautiful. I think it was my responsibility. And I think that I didn't do what I needed to do to make sure that I was a priority. So I think that going through the process of the divorce, I really just had to face myself with myself. And when that happened, and when there's prayer involved and fasting and really trying to get to the root of some things, that's when I think I started understanding, okay, it's my responsibility to make sure I'm happy. There's nobody else that can fill that void. If there's a void there, I got to go to the Lord and I got to figure out what's going on and why don't I feel this way. So I realized I had a lot of self-confidence issues. I realized I had self-esteem issues, and I don't want to blame anybody else for that. I just had to kind of go through the process of doing the work to get to the other side. I think so many women go and think that a man can make them feel better, make them feel beautiful just because they're giving them attention.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Money, you know what I mean? Nice clothes, different things. If you would have seen me on social media or just in person, I carry myself well. You would not think that internally I was battling depression and I was battling feeling not good enough and things like that. So I think we can put on a mask oftentimes, but it's important to really be honest with ourselves and get in the nitty gritty. Okay. And sometimes we got to wrestle with things, and that wrestling is ugly at times. So me and the Lord, we went toe to toe for a little bit because I was like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm angry. I'm frustrated. And he really had to sit me down and be like, okay, let's pull the carpet up and let's see where this is coming from. So that was part of the process.
Okay. And so what I think is interesting, so wrestling, having this kind of internal battle with yourself, it's all while sitting in the pew of somebody's church.
Yes.
And so I'm interested to know, I know some stuff, but it's how did the church, whether from a child up until now, how did that influence either your lack of self-esteem, because I know that was a struggle, or even building yourself up back again from being divorced? Or did they not play a role at all?
I think there's layers to that. So let's go to being younger. In the church, I really, really got involved into the church when I was in high school. So I would say around 15, 16 is when I found a church home that really spoke to my spirit and my soul. And I feel like it was kind of old school church. A lot of, women do this. I mean, when we're looking at marriage, let's talk about marriage.
Okay.
So women do this and have this role, and men do this and have this role. And I feel like the examples that I saw, and just watching my parents, be married, the examples that I saw, I never really felt like as a woman, anybody in the church taught me how to love myself.
But that's that confuses me though, because I'm like, you talk about how you learn to be a wife from a whole bunch of wives up in the church, but one of the things, like what's one of the commandments, one of the greater commandments, like to love your neighbor as yourself. Well, perhaps maybe that's why we have a lack of that in church, because most people don't love themselves. You know what I'm saying? So,
and the role that they were taking, the examples that I had was, the women took it. They took a lot of stuff. And in that, I didn't see self-love. So the example that I'm watching, in church growing up, in church now as an adult, in church being married, when I was married, even stuff with my parents, the women, they took a lot of stuff that now I'm like, I would never hope. I don't have a daughter, but if I had a daughter, my nieces, I would hope that they would never tolerate some of the stuff that I've watched. So if that was my example, I mean, how was I supposed to know how to love myself? Because that wasn't self-love, what I saw.
Yeah.
You took a lot of stuff that we teach women now. Don't settle for that, or don't tolerate that, And it was
it's
confusing.
almost like a badge of honor. Like, well, me and my husband been together for 52 years. Yeah, but he got like 17 side babies.
Baby, listen.
And they sitting on the other side of the church. I mean, y'all, so let me know, like, do you know anybody, is that y'all experience? Like, drop a comment, like, what was your experience like if you're a wife, aspiring to be a wife? Like, what have you learned in church? Because I could say I've had like that same experience, like, because it's kind of like, it's such a weird thing. So I don't know if you feel like this. So it's kind of like this idea of like purity culture, like Black church didn't call it purity culture, but it's kind of like the same messaging. Was like, oh, if you have sex before marriage, you're going to hell. You got to cover yourself up. Don't cause your brother to fall. Okay, so we got all this. We're trying to be covered, trying to be strapped down, or whatever any of that means. Okay, so we're making sure we're not causing our brother to fall. But also, when you get to a certain age, it's like, oh, girl, you ain't got you a husband yet? Well, I just got out of high school. Like, I'm just going to college. Like, but how am I supposed to get me a husband? Like, in the meantime and all of that, nobody ever said, like, well, who are you in God? What did God call you to do? What's your destiny? What's your purpose?
Yes.
It's like, I go from keep yourself covered to find you a man.
And have some babies.
And have some babies. Like, well, what if I
and deal with whatever happens within that.
Exactly.
But you don't know who you are for yourself or in God. So then what?
And then how are you supposed to stay? It's kind of like, why is it a badge of honor? Because you've been with your husband for however long, and you took, like you said, women took like being, I don't know if you the main chick or the side chick, I don't know, but it was like, well, men gonna do what they.
Baby, listen, that's not what. Yeah, and that's not what we need to continue on. Stop teaching that, and stop telling people like it's a badge of honor. That's not cute.
No,
and it's not safe. Like, that's not keeping your heart or your body safe to be able to tolerate knowing that you one of many or others. Like, and you're just married, so then that's just what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, because that's what you need to do. Like, as a woman, like, you have accomplished, I don't know, God's goal, if you will. If you keep yourself together, keep yourself a virgin, because God forbid some of y'all, all of them were virgins when they got married.
Right.
Keep yourself a virgin when you get married, and when you get married, make sure you keep them by any means necessary. I'm still trying to figure out, like, the scriptures I read about what love actually is and what love was actually taught to be. Like, half of my broken hearts I wouldn't have had I known what actual love is. If it's supposed to be patient and kind and not puffed up, not keeping record of wrong. Well, I mean, that would have knocked out at least a couple of them jokers. Because
that's not what they showed you,
No, but they had a job.
Okay, that's
and
nice.
And they went to church.
And that's nice.
They went to church because Lord knows, as long as you're going to church and you serve in some capacity, whether you a deacon, a musician. I mean, we ain't going to ride the musician train because
we ain't got to ride the musician train.
We ain't going to ride the musician train. But if you a deacon, you a preacher, you a whatever, as long as he goes to church, as long as he comes, that's fine. Nobody said anything about his character.
Right, because the Bible talks about we should know them by their fruits. So what are they producing? You know what I mean? Watching them past being at church or being in the pulpit, watching their character and being able to see like, okay, what is coming out of them? Like, who are they surrounding themselves with? You know what I mean? Are they kind? Do they even all of these different things? Just how did they operate on a day to day? That will tell you more than anything else. Because sometimes it can just be a front, the whole church thing. That can just be a front. I really actually don't want to meet nobody in church because I don't know if that's real or not. Like, I need to see you outside of church. I need to see you on day to day. I need to see how you operate. How do you treat your family members? How do you treat your friends? Yeah. Do you have integrity? When nobody's watching, that's something I teach my boys.
Yeah.
I want you to have integrity and do the right thing when nobody is watching. And if I'm watching you and I'm seeing you talk to your friend on the phone, get off the phone, call somebody else and gossip about what they just told you not to say anything about. Okay.
Yeah, I hope what comes out of this, and that the whole purpose of having this podcast and having these conversations is to talk about our human experience, right? Because for whatever reason, growing up in church and what they teach you about what being a believer Christian is kind of like this whole idea of like, so yes, we're supposed to die to our flesh, right? Mm-hmm. Because our flesh wants what it wants, and most times it's not things of God, right? However, the experiences that we have, whether good or bad, shape who we are.
Absolutely.
So it's like, we're not going to talk about how in church and having these women tell me that I'm, I don't know, I'm shaking too much when I walk. Like, that affected me some type of way. You know what I mean? It's wild. And I'm 13, 14. I don't even know what that means.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's
but
crazy.
That affected me in how I thought God saw me. Because we, for whatever reason, we associate like, well, these are his leaders. Like, yeah. So what they're saying and doing must be right. So that's supposed to be what I follow. Mm-hmm. And so I hope that taking off the Band-Aids, because a lot of us just patch our wounds up with Band-Aids. I hope taking off these Band-Aids and exposing these wounds, we can actually heal.
Absolutely.
Because that's what we're supposed to do. So how are you actually healing? Because, and you can share a little bit of your story if you feel comfortable, because that's one of the things I feel like as a culture, like a Black culture, Black church culture, we talk about healing in the sense of having these theatrics in church, right? Well, such went through something. She gonna go up to the altar. She gonna get prayed for. The preacher gonna hit her with a body slam, and everything's gonna be all good. But yet she's going to leave there dealing with the same depression, dealing with the same, if she's had issues with her husband, issue with her kids, issues internally from something she didn't heal from as a child. So I want to know how you're healing from the divorce, the things that have happened that have brought you to this point right now.
I mean, it's kind of hard to go into it. Well, not everybody knows my story, but I don't know how much you want me to share as far as just, I was married for almost 11 years. And, it was 11 years by the time the divorce was final. I've been divorced for, I guess it's a year and a half now. And I have two sons, 6 and almost 9 years old. And that was a challenge going through a transition of, being in a marriage for a very long time and having a family unit to just completely feeling like you have no resources and you have no help or connection. So the church, when you're in the church, that's kind of your safe zone, right? Mm-hmm. So the church that I no longer go to anymore, but the church that I was attending and we were attending as a family at that time, when everything kind of happened, I can honestly say that it was a starting point for me to kind of separate myself because the pastor at the time, I remember vividly, we were on the phone and he flat out told me that he was going to deal with this situation privately. And I told him back, I cannot step foot back in the church.
What is it? I mean, so if it's too much to ask, like, what does that even mean? dealing with it privately?
Well, my ex-husband, was a musician at the church. So with him being in
purely coincidence, guys. Purely coincidence.
with him being in a leadership position and in the forefront, it made it a little bit complicated, for me, because I said, how am I supposed to go back? That's challenging.
Yeah.
So I felt, this is how I felt. This is my truth. I felt like the pastor chose the music, and the backing up and all of those things over my soul, because I was a member too. And by you saying that you were going to deal with it privately, I felt like you left me. I was the sheep, the one. And I felt like I didn't have a support system then, because I'm like, wait, what about me? Like, they're still going to be getting fed. They're still in their role. They didn't get sat down. Why are you telling me that you're going to deal with this privately? Like, what about me? And I never stepped foot back. It was enough to draw me away from the house of God. And it didn't draw me away from God in my personal relationship, but it created a strain because I didn't have that community support. I didn't have that in-house support of people to help me during that process.
Yeah.
So I had my small village that I still lean on, but it drew me away from the house of God in the physical.
So what would have support have looked like for you during that time? Because the reasons, and that's up to you to share, like why it was necessary for something to be done, I think that would have superseded anything, because at the end of the day, like there are biblical instructions on how you deal with sin and things in the church, especially if you are a leader.
Right.
And from what you're saying, those particular things were not followed.
Right.
So what would that have looked like if there were better support for you?
Right. Well, first, let's call a spade a spade. There was infidelity that led to the separation and the divorce ultimately. So with that being said, like you said, there are specific instructions that, you would think should happen, in leadership positions. When I grew up, I was used to people being sat down. So what support would have looked like to me is, them being sat down, counseling happening, maybe not so much together, but for me being offered, like for him to counsel me and having that option, maybe the first lady, something of, let's bring both of you separately or whatever into the office and let's have conversations. But I just felt like he chose him, he let me go, and that was just that.
And nothing after that.
And nothing after that. I mean, when I told him that I couldn't come back, he said, I understand. If you need anything, I'm only a phone call away, basically. Like, it was just normal. So for me, it kind of went back to, in my mind, when you said at the beginning, there's stuff that, happens sometimes in church and in the pulpit. And I feel like they kind of just had each other's backs in that sense. And I don't want to say it's a man thing, but I just feel like I just was the lesser of the two, and I wasn't important enough. This is how I felt. I wasn't important enough for something to be done to help me get through and heal. Not saying I don't know what happened with them. I don't know if they got counsel, but I'm just saying I didn't. So it drew me away from the house. But support to me would have been like, okay, hey, do you want to talk? Do you want me to have first lady, like, bring you in the office, let's counsel and talk about this, and I'm going to help you get through this. If you choose to not come back, I understand, but I want you to know that I'm here as a support, that we are here as a support. So that's what it would have looked like for me.
So care.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think, cause I mean, we could talk about like, I don't want to necessarily get into like trending topics or anything like that, but I know there's like some things going on right now where a certain gospel artist made a comment about like God not being the church, and everybody's all up in arms. And I'm like, well, did you miss the message of what he's saying? It's kind of like, again, he's a pastor, he's a gospel artist, and he pastors a church, and he's saying like the institution of the church is not God. And to me, I respected that comment so much, because a lot of us have experienced certain things in church that were negative experiences, and we're not knocking or knocking church in general. Like, I love church, like I love God and I love his church, but I've also had some pretty horrible, mortifying experiences within the church as well. And so it's freeing to me to hear someone say, hey, God isn't the church, because please understand the people that are in the church are human beings and they will fail you. They will disappoint you. Do you think that knowing that, would it make a difference? Would it help a part of your healing if you were to hear from the pastor, if they were like, hey, you know what? My bad. Like, I could have done better. I could have just, did something different. And I apologize, especially if that maybe, caused a stumbling block in your relationship with Christ, because, you're a representative, obviously, right? By being a pastor. And I didn't make the cut. So
I would say that at that time, yes. But now, I think everything happened the way it was supposed to. I think that by it happening that way, it allowed me to really have to just hold on to God's unchanging hand. Literally, it was just me and him. So many nights, just sleepless nights, just dark nights. It made me literally rely on God for myself. And it drew me closer to him ultimately, because I wasn't making anybody else my resource. I wasn't idolizing anybody else in the process. It was literally just me and the Lord. And I understand, that everybody is flesh and human, and I don't really hold anything against anyone at the church or anything at this point, because the healing, I've gone through that process. But at that time, I was very angry, and it probably would have helped in that moment, but I get it. And, I've forgiven the situation, and I don't need to hear from anybody to make it better, because I've just come to the point where I acknowledge that sometimes you have to forgive, and you have to be okay with not getting the closure that you may have wanted.
Yeah.
You have to come
That's
to
a
terms with
huge
that.
thing. That's a huge thing. I know a lot of us, I even at one point in time, like, and it's not necessarily you receive or have heard from like the pastor specifically, but sometimes being in church, because humans are going to disappoint and fail you. You have these experiences, and it's like, one, because I don't think anybody teaches that when it comes to like emotional intelligence and how to handle specific things. Like, you want somebody to take accountability for what you've done.
Absolutely.
And it's like, why is it that I have to be the one to, we like to use that verse, turning the other cheek, for that person's advantage. Like, oh, well, you're supposed to turn the other cheek. Well, you're also supposed to take accountability, right? But we don't want to do that. Right. Like, because I guess kind of like that mirror you talked about, that you had to face yourself. God had to put the mirror in front. Like, well, no. Yeah, everybody has a piece of how they contributed to the situation, but you also have a piece. Yep. And I think for the offended, it almost feels like the person that receives the hurt, the person that's offended, has to be the one to face themselves on their own and just have to face reality and forgive without that acknowledgement, without that apology, without any of those things. And it stings a little bit when it feels like other people just get to move on, and I'm trying to pick up the pieces of my shattered heart here.
Baby, let me tell you something.
Like, I'm trying to gather what I can gather, and everybody just out frolicking.
Yes.
Like, like nothing ain't happened. Like, you didn't just, shoot my heart into pieces. Like, do you all feel like that? Like, has that happened to you at, like, when you were in church, or a believer, another saint, or maybe a leader? You kind of had that experience and you've had to move on, or maybe you haven't. Maybe you haven't yet. So the point of this particular episode that I want to get to is, maybe you're that person. Maybe you've gone through, a divorce. Maybe you've had to deal with infidelity. Maybe you've, we don't want to say church hurt, but I'll say church hurt, because that's the term that people are familiar with. Maybe you've experienced church hurt, and now you're mad at God, and now, you kind of feel like you're stuck in this kind of like limbo where you're just kind of existing. You're just kind of floating along in life. If that's you, drop a comment, because it's not just to put your business out there. I do want to pray with you and pray for you, but also it's to start the process of your healing. One thing I said before is, God cannot heal anything that you won't reveal. Come on. Right? So drop a comment if that's you, because the truth of the matter is this: You may not get that acknowledgement. You may never get that apology. You may have to face forgiveness, which is for yourself, right? All on your own. And we're both here to tell you that is okay. And it is worth it for you to find what God has for you, for your purpose, for your destiny. Because if you're alive, if you're up, breathing and moving, you do have a purpose, whether it's a big one or a small one. And it's up to you to find that, unfortunately. It's not going to be by the hands of the pastor. It's not going to be by the hands of another leader, your mama, your daddy, or whomever. It's by you. So start your process of healing. Start having a conversation out loud about the things that you've experienced. You know, we talked about, like, before the episode started, like, you know, experience we had as little girls in church and how certain things we saw, like, you know, that wasn't right. And that hurt me. That affected me negatively. And I didn't even know it was trauma. I didn't even know it was a thing. If that's you, that is okay. But start having that conversation. So as we kind of come to the end of this particular episode, what is it that you can give to our friends here? Like, whether it's from whatever perspective, it's like, what affirmation, what thing that you've learned that has gotten you kind of to the other side of your healing?
For me, you know, Romans 8:28, all things work together for the good of those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. I have literally had to repeat that to myself, sometimes on a daily basis, to encourage myself that even if it doesn't feel like it right now, even if you feel like you are the victim in a situation, or you are on the side of, you know, hurt and pain and agony and whatever you're feeling, depression, God can use every single thing that you have gone through. And he will if you let him. And that's the thing. We have to let him work in our lives. We have to let him heal those hurts. We have to let him get into the depths of our heart. Okay. He knows what's truly in our heart. And like Enjoli was saying before, like, if you don't, you know, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry in the moment, but you said something and I was about to bring it back. But basically what I am trying to say, that if you don't acknowledge it for yourself, you have to acknowledge it, because in order for God to deal with it, I feel like we know he can do all things. But if we aren't honest with ourselves, like, Lord, this hurts me. I'm holding on to this unforgiveness. I'm holding on to this pain from back when I was 8 years old and I saw this thing happen to, you know, this person, or this happened in the church and I witnessed that. You have to acknowledge that to God so he can work on it. Let him do it, but be honest with yourself and then be honest with him and then let it go. And then let it go. So that is my advice to you guys. You know, just know that the things that you are going through right now, it will work out. It will work out and it'll be in your favor and God will get the glory. You have to just allow him to. And, you know, keep pressing. Speak positively over yourself and over your circumstances, even if you don't feel it. So sometimes I would have to wake up and literally not want to get out the bed, but I would say, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. You know, I am the head and not the tail. And I had to get to the point where I'm not the victim anymore. You know what I mean? This happened to me, but this does not define me. And when you get to that point, God's done something. He's done something. Yeah. Some healing has happened. And just continue on your journey and just try to stay positive.
Well, there is nothing else I can add to that. So, if you haven't already, make sure you like this video. Make sure you share it with your friends. Yes. Like, don't be stingy with trying to get healed, girl. Share it with your friends. Make sure you subscribe so you can stay up on all the episodes that are dropping. As we say in Chic Life, I want you to live life. I want you to love God. And I want you to live chic. I'll talk to you soon. Live life of God.